Greetings and welcome to In-Depth. I'm Dike Rostant. The Department of Creative and Festival Arts is a department in the Faculty of Humanities and Education at the University of the West Indies St. Augustine Campus. Now, we are going to speak to that in addition to the old yard with Dr. Joanne Tull, an academic, researcher, consultant in Caribbean creative economy development with particular interest in festival statistics, cultural industries development impacts, and creative entrepreneurship and strategy. Dr. Tull, thank you so much for making the time. How you do?
I am well, thank you. Happy New Year to you and your viewers. It is great being here as always.
The pleasure is ours. Now, I don't know if you want to start to talk about DCFA or you want to start to talk about the old yard, but we have the time to do it. So, however you want to spill that ball.
Well, let's talk about the host of the event first, DCFA. So we are known fondly out there in the creative economy, cultural arena as DCFA, which stands for the Department of Creative and Festival Arts. And we are based in the Faculty of Humanities and Education, as you mentioned, at the University of the West Indies, UWI. And one of the interesting things about DCFA, as the name indicates, is that we are also concerned with the festival-esque, with festival and the festival ecosystem. And so quite naturally, when we went into the direction of creating a carnival studies unit, this seemed like a natural synergy, given that Trinidad and Tobago is the birthplace of a particular kind of carnival. And so DCFA felt that it had a responsibility to engage in carnival studies in a particular way, not just in terms of which would be my field, the business of arts, but quite naturally the performative as well as the history and legacy of the carnival. And that syncs quite naturally with what we offer at DCFA, which would be, of course, our dance program, theater program, music program, visual arts, along with carnival, as we mentioned, at the undergraduate level. And then notwithstanding carnival, the other areas are also offered at the certificate level. We are also the proud host, if you may call it that, Center for Postgraduate Studies in Creative Design Entrepreneurship, and of course, my fund program, Arts, Culture, and Enterprise Management. And so all of that collectively for us represents what we consider as our important intervention where performing arts education is concerned. And with our particular topic, those other areas are very important to support to the carnival landscape. And so the old yard, I suppose, is a useful event that helps us to represent and reflect what we are teaching across the programs.
And a little while ago, and still too close, I think there was a bit of contention. And to me, the question that was being asked was, why study ourselves? So take me through that a little bit from where you sit, please, in terms of marrying our cultural practices with a sort of academic rigor so that we are able to tell our own stories, one, and also just kind of document the path to self-determination.
Right. So that's a very important question you've raised there, and observation. And I think one can take it on about 3 or possibly even 4 levels. The first that you would have mentioned there is the philosophical, which is the very point that if one is to go forward, one has to know oneself. And knowing oneself is the anchor between going forward and your past. If we were to take this in a general kind of descriptive discussion, we know that if we are to appreciate one's past, you have to appreciate self in the present. A lot of people do not take that into clear consideration. And I suppose it has a lot to do with the various influences that we may have around us at this time in the world. And of course, people like to blame social media. That is just one example. But the fact of the matter is that if you are to be clear on oneself, you do have to engage in yourself. And that is the philosophical point. that leads to the conceptual, which is that you have to be able to define yourself. And it's interesting because in the Caribbean, we do take that seriously. One of our important phrases across the Caribbean land is telling people, study yourself, study yourself. So the idea of studying yourself is about you take your time, meaning know who you are, or know not only who you are, but know who you are addressing. So again, I'm taking it at that level that any average person can understand. Where the university or a university is concerned, part of our responsibility is building knowledge. And building knowledge not only has to do with teaching and learning and pedagogy, but it's also about informing and upholding value systems and whatever the university may deem to be important. We are the University of, sorry, let me put it a different way, as we say, the University of the West Indies. And as such, it means that we are very much concerned with Caribbean life, lifestyle, living, or progress or development or past or challenges or failures or opportunities or strengths, etc., etc. If we are to contemplate any of those things, you have to be very clear philosophically and conceptually on who you are. And then for me, which perhaps is my most important one, is how we go about doing that. And that is where sometimes we in the Caribbean may be challenged, the how. And so again, this is part of the university's mandate in terms of research and development, that we would create the pillars, the platforms, the methodologies, the methods, the action steps, even if we are asked to do that, as to how we go about informing who we are, who we were, and who we want to be. And I'm saying this we as a Caribbean collective in terms of not just us as people, but our institutions, our societies, our services, our institutions, and so on.
And you skimping, or you have that fourth one that you want to share with me as well?
Well, the fourth one would be the implementation. And so this is where policy would come in for a university and our department. We like to practice what we preach. So it is not just about teaching, but it is also about setting up our pedagogical platform such that our students have opportunity to engage in the performative. And performative isn't just in terms of the performing arts, but certainly in terms of my fields, that they are able to go out into the creative industries or the carnival industries and practice and engage, be mentored, serve as apprentices, and so on, that they can, of course, share what they are learning at university, and of course, learn from those who are out there in those industries, so that their knowledge and their skill set will build. So implementation is the fourth critical one. So we not only have methodologies and we figure out the way forward, but we actually implement, you practice what you're preaching.
And with that, with regard to practicing what you're preaching, passing around collection plate and thing, how does the old yard feature into this conversation that we're having?
Right. So the old yard would perhaps be our sterling example right now of practicing what we're preaching, where the study of carnival is concerned. We do continue to engage in the business of carnival, particularly through my work and other things from time to time that the department would engage in. But the old yard, I would say, would be our flagship, in the sense that it is used in about 3 or 4 ways. One, it serves as a repository of traditional mass arts. You can come to the old yard every year and engage with the old yard as a lived experience. And in some parts of the literature, if we are talking to cultural and carnival scholars, you may see it referred to as a living experience or a living museum. And what that means is that we try very much to present how the yard was at that time, when that particular kind of traditional mass form was pouring onto the streets of Port of Spain. And Errol Hill documents it, Professor Errol Hill documents it quite well when he itemizes in one of his papers all of the different characters that we had at that time in Port of Spain. I suppose we would imagine there in the Duncan Street area. And so what we do here at DCFA through the old yard is to replicate that visually, in terms of trying as best as we can to authentically represent and represent how the houses back in those days in the backyard would look, using various kinds of recyclable materials to show how the artistry and the artwork would have looked at those things, as well, of course, to then ensconce that within the performance, which, of course, would be the traditional masquerade. And pulling from our stakeholders, those who will be considered the sterling master artists in the various types of the masquerade to present that. So it's a repository in that way. It's also educational because we do have a lot of students who come into the yard. And when I say students, not just university, but many from the secondary schools who would need the material for their CSEC and CAPE subjects to see these characters performed live and of course to hear and see the stories that go along with those characters to help build their respective projects. Thirdly, for the university, in particular DCFA, it serves as a training platform. So we are also using it to train our students. My students, of course, the festival management / festival project class, that is where they are trained. This is something that has gone along in the past with when we used to have a FET that we use as a training lab as well. So DCFA is really no stranger to the carnival landscape in that regard. Now, when we are able to, given the time frame of the carnival, you would see the students working in other people's events. We've been fortunate to even work Soca Monarch. So that the yard itself now tries to give the flip side of the contemporary carnival landscape to allow the students to engage with festival management and festival project practice for heritage projects and what we would call traditional mass arts. And then I suppose there may be even another one, which is, of course, that it helps us to contribute to our cultural economy, our carnival landscape. We, as a regional institution, I think we have that responsibility to give support to the efforts of, say, the NCC, Ministry of Culture, Ministry of Tourism. And so the university, I believe, I may say, is proud to continue to offer the yard annually to be able to do just that.
We're going to talk about some of those logistics when we return from this break. This feels like you had somebody, like your children, divide a cake and somebody get a big half and somebody get a small half. So we're finishing the big half
like that.
And we're coming back with the small half. We are speaking with Dr. Joanne Tull. Stay with us. We return after this. Welcome back. We are speaking about the old yard, but we're speaking about so much more with Dr. Joanne Tull. And looking at the fact there's so many things that you said just before we took that break, Dr. Tull. But I want to follow up on facilitating a process of engagement between stakeholders and students. And when I say stakeholders, I mean practitioners, mass men and women, and having people affording them a space to speak.
Yes.
Because I know there's mentoring by the masters. This is not that the Ministry of Tourism, Culture and the Arts does, but I think it needs so many more things, points of engagement. It can't just be one point, because one point won't catch the entire cohort.
Certainly, I agree. I suppose when one thinks of projects like the Old Yard, they really operate in a supportive kind of way. We were using the phrase before about practicing what you preach, and I suppose one could elaborate in that in a more direct and reflective way, in line of what you were just mentioning, mentoring masters as an example. The fact is, you have to utilize what are the standards, the quality standards and systems that go along with planning, executing, and even wrapping up projects such as an Old Yard. It's an event, but it's really also a project. And when you do that, you are then required, I suppose, to do one, two, or maybe even three things, which is that you have to pull from the pool of stakeholders that do it really well. So it means now you're exposing the students to a pool of persons, a cadre of persons who are very good at what they do. Two, the university is using this as an opportunity to give recognition and acknowledgement to those who may not have even entered their doors, but recognize that what they have built through the years is equally important, even though they may not have a degree in it. And I think that is very important to be noted. I think sometimes there are people who would assume that, you know, the opposite of not having a degree is not having, and that is not true, particularly for the cultural industries. The cultural industries in the Caribbean have very much been built on people's wealth of knowledge and expertise based on them learning by doing. And so learning by doing is something that university would give to me support, encouragement to. We certainly see it in DCFA. And that goes along quite well with the third, which is to help set the standard for qualification. Quite certainly, I think we would all appreciate if we were to take dance. A ballerina will not be an excellent ballerina if he or she does not go through the course of study that goes along with the practical. And so those to me are the very critical nuances of the systems then, as you would have mentioned, that have to be in place if we really are to do this well. It's not that the yard is utopic. That's not what we're saying. But all of what we're discussing here is really how through the years, we've reached 12 years now, after having taken it from its old dispensation via Loku, and try to make it something that every year, you know, there is a takeaway from it. That is not just certainly, we think people having a good time is very important, of course, but that it really does serve this purpose or these purposes in terms of what we are discussing here.
And we have just under 3 minutes, so I don't want to squeeze information at the end, but what day is it? How do people get there? Are there tickets involved? Give me that information, thank you.
So it's Sunday, 4th of February. The old yard has maintained its traditional spot, which is the Sunday before Carnival week starts. And we begin at 12 noon and we finish at 6 o'clock. We are at our DCFA grounds on Gordon Street, which is next to the law school on the same compound as the open campus. And you can access tickets from DCFA on the same compound, or you may call 662-2002 and ask for the department. You can also check us on Facebook, the Department of Creative and Festival Arts. You can also check us on Instagram for updates. Tickets are $100 for adults, $60 for children. And we have a lot of activities going on within the yard. It's not just the performances. We have our food court. We have our craft market. We also have entertainment for children. This year, we are celebrating blue. Ironic that your background is blue. This is the year of the blue. For some people, who may not know, every year the yard chooses a theme. And so this year, we are celebrating blue. I'm sure people can think of things to do with Carnival that are blue. And so that, if you want to know more about that, you will certainly find yourself at the yard, but I can promise it will be very exciting.
And we're excited already just listening to it, because there's so many possibilities that this can be a launching pad for. Because sometimes I tell people that the teachers that I appreciated the most, they didn't necessarily give me all the answers, but they used to pat up my head. And so I needed to go and sort out that dissonance, but they also left breadcrumbs to possible answers, as opposed to saying, okay, well, this is what it is. So we want to thank you for the work that you and DCFA are doing. And on behalf of the entire TTT News team, this has been In Depth with me, Dike Rostant. Thank you so much for joining us.